Good morning. Let us begin today's session by looking at the poem The Scholar Gypsy. This poem is prescribed for the students of BA Part 3 in Paper 1, English Literature. First, the introduction of the poem. An elegy is a lyric poem that has a mournful, melancholy tone. The pastoral elegy is a poem about both death and idyllic rural life. This genre is a subgroup of pastoral poetry. Genre can be understood as style or category where literature is concerned. The Scholar Gypsy was written by poet and essayist Matthew Arnold in 1853. The theme of this poem is shepherd's life, death, grief and concern over rural countryside life. The poem is based on a story which was found in the Vanity of Dogmatizing, 1661, written by Joseph Glanville. The shepherd and their life are the main characteristic features of pastoral elegy. Matthew Arnold wrote this poem in 1853 in Victorian England, which was the age of industrialization and machinery. During this era, England was a great empire which colonized many countries. 19th century was a transition period between the traditional life of the 18th century and the modernity of the 20th century. It was also a period of rapid changes because there was the Industrial Revolution as well as other scientific revolutions which people could not internalize yet. There were sudden scientific and technological developments like the introduction of steam power and railroads. During the early Victorian period, that is from 1832 to 1848, England was moving from agriculture, becoming more industrial and urban. As a result of the Industrial Revolution and a decreasing need in human power to work problems appeared like, need in human power at work, problems appeared like poverty, unemployment and loss of product in agricultural areas, which caused peasants to move to cities. During the mid-Victorian period, from 1848 to 1870, the huge economic gap between the poor and the rich increased more and more. This period is also marked by the remarkable gap between science and religion. Words like Darwin's On an Origin of Species put forward the idea of man's accidental existence in the universe, which shattered people's faith in religion. Therefore, people started to question religion. The late Victorian period from 1870 to 1901 is marked by the collapse of Victorian values of progress, improvement and discovery. England was still a powerful country, but its power was started to be challenged by the emergence of other world powers such as Germany and America. Considering the conditions of Victorian era, it can be sensed that it was a totally anti-pastoral age in its own nature, as it is possible to see the lack of three unities mentioned above. First of all, the industrial development separated man from nature. This separation is not only metaphorical but also literal, as the peasants, meaning farmers, had to move to the cities to work at the factories for earning money. Man's alienation, in a way distancing from nature, led to two other levels of alienation. First, he became alienated from himself and then from society. In the poem, Arnold describes his own age with harsh realism, and the characteristics of his criticism are the same as the characteristics of anti-pastoral, is unidealized, harsh, unattractive. It emphasizes realism. It shows tensions, disorders, and inequalities. As the world that is described by pastoral has been illuminated, the poem will be analyzed to reveal in what respects it can be interpreted as anti-pastoral. Matthew Arnold's poem is based on a 17th century Oxford story found in Joseph Glanvill's The Vanity of Dogmatizing. In Glanvill's story, a poor Oxford student leaves his studies and joins a group of gypsies. He becomes friends with the gypsies who teach him many of the secrets of their life. The Oxford student has a traditional education among them, and he also learns to do wonders using his power of imagination. In his poem, Arnold makes use of the Oxford student in two ways. Firstly, he uses him as a means to demonstrate the contrast between past and the present. Secondly, he makes use of him to draw attention to the differences between the lives of the gypsies and the life of modern man. In both cases, his purpose is to reveal what kind of a life he has and what kind of a life he is yearning to have. In the poem, Arnold refers to the Oxford student as shepherd. The poem opens with an apostrophe in which the poet addresses the Oxford student or the shepherd. And the opening lines are, "Go, for they call you shepherd from the hill. Go, shepherd, and unite the wattled coats. No longer leave thy wistful flock unfed, nor let thy bawling fellows rock their throats, nor the cropped herbage shoot another head, but when the fields are still, and the tired men and dogs all gone to rest, and only the white sheep are sometimes seen, cross and recross the strips of moon-blanched green, come shepherd, and again begin the quest." These are lines 1 to 10 of the poem The Scholar Gypsy. Right at the beginning of the poem, Arnold tells the Oxford student to go. Certainly, the poet wants him to go back to the world of his gypsy friends who are united with nature. The poet suggests that the student should come back to Arnold's time only when the fields are still, line 6, and the white sheep are sometimes seen, line 8. Arnold's sense of longing for the days when man and nature were united is felt clearly from the beginning of the poem. Arnold is yearning, that is, he has a strong desire for a reconciliation between man and nature. Reconciliation can be understood as coming to terms with something, being in a way reunited when there has been a separation or some kind of a quarrel, and you put an end to the quarrel and become friends once again. Arnold is yearning for a reconciliation between man and nature as it was in the past. Therefore, it can be stated that the first issue that Matthew Arnold complains of is man's separation from nature. Another particular issue that Arnold draws in attention in the poem is man's need for imagination and trust in supernatural and magical powers, as the education of the gypsies is based on these teachings rather than the theoretical knowledge taught at Oxford. Oxford here stands for the Oxford University. In lines 57-58, the poet states that the Oxford student has been seen by shepherds. Shepherds had met him on the Hurst in spring at some lone alehouse in the Berkshire moors. In lines 101 to 106, the poet also implies that the student was seen by housewives and children at some lone homestead in the Cumnor Hills, where at her open door the housewife dance means repairs clothes, thou hast been seen or hanging on a gate to watch the threshers in the mossy barns, children who early range these slopes and late for cresses from the rills. It is interesting that the Oxford student has been seen by shepherds, housewives, and children. If these three groups of people are regarded together, it is clear that shepherds, housewives, and children are people who have not yet lost their innocence in the modern age. They are people who are much more united with nature than the rest of the people. In the poem, the Oxford student is already a shepherd himself. A housewife is usually a mother who is the symbol of sincere love and care, and a child is the most innocent person. In almost all pastoral poems, shepherds are either children or young boys who are innocent as they are close to nature. In Pastoral Ideals and the Life Cycle, it is stated that, and I quote from the book, pastoral is generated by a rejection of adulthood and middle age, because man loses his innocence as he grows older. In lines 141 to 150, the poet talks about the modern man and tells us what kind of a life he and his contemporaries pursue. Pursue means to follow. No, thou hast not felt the lapse of hours, for what wears out the life of mortal men? 'Tis that from change to change their being rolls. 'Tis that repeated shocks again and again exhaust the energy of strongest souls and numb the elastic powers, till having used our nerves with bliss and teen, and tired upon 1,000 schemes our wit, to the just pausing genius we remit our worn out life and are what we have been. In these lines, Arnold complains of other aspects of urban life. First of all, he is referring to the lapse of hours, line 141, stating that time goes so fast in his age. He refers to repeated shocks in line 144, which are probably modern man's disappointments, and underlines that they exhaust the energy of strongest souls, line 145. The poet implies that even a strong-willed person cannot live in the modern age without being disappointed. Arnold states that modern man uses all his brain capacity on schemes in line 148 instead of producing something useful. As a result of all this tiring struggle, modern man is worn out in line 150. In lines 171 to 175, Arnold refers to modern man's relationship with religion and lack of unity between man and religion is another issue that makes him unhappy. The lines are, "Thou waitest for the spark from heaven, and we, light half-believers of our casual creeds, who never deeply felt nor clearly willed, whose insights never has borne fruit in deeds, whose vague resolves never have been fulfilled." In these lines, Arnold clearly verbalizes his longing for the days when religion was not questioned. Arnold also underlies that modern man does not feel his faith in his heart. That is why they are half believers. The poet refers to modern man's disappointments and indecisiveness. The modern man greets each new day with new hopes and wishes, yet he does not do anything to achieve them but wait. Therefore, each day starts with new hopes but ends with disenchantment. This seems to be the destiny of modern man and displays his helpless situation in the universe. Each year we see breeds new beginnings, disappointments new, who hesitate and falter life away and lose tomorrow the ground won today. Ah, do not we wanderer await it too? Yes, we await it, but it still delays. Lines 176 to 181. Modern man has many things in his mind to think of and has to work hard to survive. Therefore, his ideas are not united. He experiences the heavy burden of thinking, and Arnold waits to be like the Oxford student who has united aims, business, and desires. Through the end of the poem, the poet warns the Oxford student not to come to his age. The poet underlies the contrast between the pastoral world of shepherds and his own pastoral world one more time when he refers to Oxford students' time as days when wits were fresh and clear and life can gaily as the sparkling Thames. The poet warns the shepherd not to come to his age, lest he becomes like them. Palsied hearts, line 205. Therefore he tells them, fly hence, our contact fear, and keep thy solitude. Lines 206 to 210. The poet says that his age is diseased, and if the shepherd comes to his age, he will have to experience the same mental strife, line 222, which gives no bliss, line 223. If the shepherd comes to live in the modern age, his youth and cheer will fade. He will grow old and he will no longer be a shepherd. Now let us take a look at the summary of the poem. The speaker of the Scholar Gypsy describes a beautiful rural setting in the pastures, with the town of Oxford lying in the distance. He watches the shepherd and reapers working amongst the field, and then tells the shepherd that he will remain out there until sundown, enjoying the scenery and studying the towers of Oxford. All the while, he will keep his book beside him. His book tells the famous story of Joseph Glanville about an impoverished Oxford student. Impoverished means poor Oxford student who leaves his studies to join a band of gypsies. Once he was immersed within their community, he learned the secrets of their trade. After a while, two of the Scholar Gypsies' Oxford associates found him, and he told them about the traditional gypsy style of learning, which emphasizes powerful imagination. His plan was to remain with the gypsies until he learned everything he could, and then to tell their secrets to the world, regularly interjecting his own wonder into the telling. The speaker continues the Scholar Gypsy's story. Every once in a while, people would claim to have seen him in the Berkshire moors. The speaker imagines him as a shadowy figure who, waiting for the spark from heaven, just like everyone else on earth is. The speaker even claims to have seen the Scholar Gypsy himself once, even though it has been over 200 years since his story first resonated through the halls of Oxford. Despite that length of time, the speaker does not believe the scholar gypsy could have died, since he had renounced the life of mortal man, including those things that wear men out to death. Things like repeated shocks again exhaust the energy of strongest souls. Having chosen to repudiate this style of life, repudiate means reject, the scholar gypsy does not suffer from such shocks, but instead is free from the sick fatigue, the languid doubt. He has escaped the perils of modern life, which are slowly creeping up and destroying men like a strong disease. The speaker finishes by imploring, that is begging, that the scholar gypsy avoid everyone who suffers from this disease, lest he becomes infected as well. That's all for today. We will continue in the next session. Thank you and goodbye.